The Democrat Party has no redeeming social, economic, or governing value. None. You know, there's a clown by the name of Michael Luciano. I call him Lucky Luciano. He's a leftist, and he writes for Mediaite, which is this Dan Abrams crackpot website. All this guy does all day is stalk me and other conservatives, trying to find something that they can put up there and embarrass people or try to humiliate people. And when they don't actually have anything, like they never really have anything on me, they try and concoct it. So I'm Hannity the other night, and I say, the Democrat Party has hated America since its founding. And he writes a long thing and says, Mark Levin doesn't get his history right again. The Democrat Party was founded in 1820. You know, the nation was founded in 1776. We had a constitution sometime thereafter. There wasn't no Democrat Party until almost 50 years after the nation's founding. Excuse me. That's not what I said. This is basic literacy. I said the Democrat Party has hated America since its founding. The subject of the sentence is the Democrat Party, not America's founding. At a minimum, you should step back and say, well, I'm not sure what he meant. But that's not what they do. So I get a history lesson from a moron who's an IQ in the negative 100s, who's the dumbest guy at the dumbest website in America. And they have this headline out there, oh, Mark Levin gets his history wrong. And Mark Levin knows his history and gets it exactly right, 100% right. This party has been behind slavery. This party was nullifying the Constitution before the Civil War. This party was protecting slavery in the states before the Civil War. This party was undermining the national government before the Civil War, rejecting the American Constitution. Even James Madison, the father of the Constitution, he was asked about this. Some of these states are nullifying these laws. What do you make about that? Aren't they free to leave? Now, what did James Madison say? A Southerner. What did he say in answer to that? When these states ratified the Constitution through their state legislatures, their state citizens also became citizens of the United States. Citizens of the United States. They can't simply now vote to deny these people their rights as citizens of the United States. Madison was a genius. He was brilliant. He's the man who is considered the father of the Constitution. Read Madison's notes and so forth. And of course, he was right. So he opposed the idea that states could break out from the Union. But the Democrat Party pushed ahead. And that's what states began to do. They were destroying the Union. They were destroying the United States of America. And they were doing it to defend slavery. The Democrat Party has never adopted and never accepted Americanism. You see Obama, when he talks about the Declaration of Independence, he leaves out our creator. No different than Woodrow Wilson. He's segregationist and a racist of the first order. Obama agreed with him on the Declaration of Independence, that it didn't mean a whole lot. You can take that stuff out about God, and then you have a nominee, the first black woman, who can't define what half of that means. She can, but she refused. She also wouldn't embrace the idea of natural law that's in the Declaration of Independence. What does that mean, natural law? It means the rights of nature. It means God. There's certain eternal truths. Eternal truths that God gives us. They are what they are. They supersede government, any ideology that man creates. Give an example. Why is murder immoral in the United States and in France? Why is murder immoral even in totalitarian regimes? It's an eternal truth. That is, it's natural law. It is what it is. Some things are just wrong because they're wrong. We don't need legislation to tell us. We don't need politicians to tell us. We don't need the government to tell us. How do we know? He told us. That's how we know. That's what the Declaration of Independence is all about. There's not a word in the Declaration about slavery. It treats everybody as equal, which is why the greatest emancipator, the greatest civil rights leader in the history of the United States, if not the history of the world, was Abraham Lincoln. Over and over and over again, he cited the Declaration of Independence. You know what he said? This is a man defending against a civil war. And by the way, not just him, Douglas was another one who defended the Constitution. Lincoln said the men who wrote that Declaration of Independence simply couldn't resolve the issue of slavery under the circumstances and the environment they had, or they wouldn't have had a country. And they needed to have a country to fight the British, or they all would have been hanged. And there never would be a free country. They wanted to resolve it. They made a run at it with the Declaration of Independence. A few southern states said no, Georgia and South Carolina among them. They made another run at it with the Constitution. Again, they had a compromise with a couple of the southern states in order to get the Constitution through, but there's not a word about slavery in the Constitution. Why is that? In fact, the only issue in the Constitution is the eventual elimination of the importation of slaves by 1820. And they don't even use the word slaves. They knew it was wrong. So what did Lincoln say? Lincoln said those men, because of the kind of society they created and the kind of government they put in place, they set the stage for the elimination of slavery, but they had to leave it to their children and grandchildren. They weren't magicians. I mean, slavery was still going on in Africa. Slavery was still going on in our hemisphere. In Brazil, Brazil was the greatest slave country in our hemisphere, and it went on much longer than our slavery did. You have slavery today in the Middle East. You have slavery in Southeast Asia. You have slavery in China. You don't have it in the United States. You don't have it in the United States because there were multiple efforts that ended even before the Civil War. In fact, most of the states had ended it after the adoption of the Constitution. That's the truth. And in fact, many black people, particularly in the North, had the right to vote at the time, even before the elimination of slavery, which really never took hold in any significant way in 2/3 of the United States in the North. But the Democrat Party never embraced Americanism. After the Civil War, which the Democrat Party lost, one of its generals decided to form the Klan, ex-Confederate soldiers and generals. And this went on for over half a century. It was a Republican president, Ulysses S. Grant, that sent the United States Army down there to blow him out. And he came very close until the Democrats took over the House in his second term, and they cut off his funding. And in doing that, they not only prevented him from blowing out the Klan, they killed Reconstruction. So the Democrats blocked Reconstruction. The Democrats then pushed the idea of separate but equal is equal. And they took their case, Plessy versus Ferguson, in 1896 to the Supreme Court of the United States. You had a private carriage company, train company in Louisiana that was a capitalist company. And in order to keep their costs down, they wanted blacks and whites to use the same carriages and the same train cars. So they were sued by the state of Louisiana, the Democrats. Went all the way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court upheld the Louisiana law that separate but equal is equal. The Republicans had fought it. Go to the turn of the century. The right to vote. Roosevelt and Taft integrated what was the United States military and the federal bureaucracy. In comes Woodrow Wilson, the great progressive. He resegregates the military and the bureaucracy. In fact, he puts this is all in the book. In fact, he puts a requirement in there that for the first time in what they considered the civil service, you had to present a picture with your resume in order to get a job. They did it to make sure blacks would not get hired in the federal government. And particularly in the post office, blacks were being fired left and right. They didn't have that union protection back then. In senior positions, any senior positions where blacks were in the federal government, thanks to the 2 Republican presidents, they were removed and replaced. And it was Woodrow Wilson who insisted on separate bathrooms, separate water fountains. This is a Democrat, so-called progressive president, one of the great progressive intellectuals, such as they are. And then, of course, so he didn't accept Americanism. He didn't accept the Declaration. He gave speech after speech denouncing the Declaration, denouncing the Constitution as too limiting to what they wanted to do. These are neo-Marxists, these so-called progressives. I call them Marxists. Some people call them neo-Marxists. They are what they are. And then we jump to the New Deal. Franklin Roosevelt. Franklin Roosevelt didn't do a thing for black people. Nothing. He didn't lift a finger. In 1940, when a law hit his desk, the federal government outlawing lynching in the states, he refused to sign it. He was running for an unprecedented 3rd term, and he wanted to get the southern states, so he wouldn't sign it. His first nominee to the Supreme Court, Hugo Black, had been the lawyer for the Klan in Alabama. And even though he eventually resigned from that slot, he kept in touch with them. That was his first nominee to the U.S. Supreme Court. And I could go on and on and on. His State Department was filled with anti-Semites. So there you are in the middle of the war, the Third Reich, the Holocaust, Jews trying to escape to other countries in Europe, Jews trying to escape to North Africa, to what we call now Israel, and of course to Canada and the United States. The anti-Semites in the State Department, you know, there are caps on how many people there were back then. Quotas can come from one country or certain ethnicities. The cap was here. The State Department put the cap here. In other words, they would not even meet the allowable number of Jews who could come in from Europe to the United States. They stopped it. It was only found out in earnest in 1944. And the individual who was in charge of that was a very close friend and donor to Franklin Roosevelt. And they worked together in the Navy Department under who? Woodrow Wilson. Folks, I can go on and on about this stuff. And I do in this book, in a full chapter. The Democrat Party, anti-black racism and anti-Semitism, followed by the next chapter, the Democrat Party, anti-white racism and anti-Semitism. So my point to you is this. The Democrat Party has no redeeming social, economic, or governing value. None.
For more, sign up for Levin TV.